Once again, let me start. Hi, I'm Maribel Lopez. In addition to being the founder of Lopez Research, I'm the founder of a nonprofit, Data for Betterment, which is basically helping individuals try to figure out how to transition their careers for the future of work and helping companies try to figure out that as well. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here today. Now, when you were thinking about coming here, why did you decide to come here? You probably decided to come here because it's a time of unprecedented change. Everything from the geopolitical environment to technology to your very jobs are changing. And in order for you to be successful, there must be a time when you take a little time for yourself out of the normal chaos of your work days and come to a different place to learn from each other. And that's why we're here today. We're here to learn from each other, to learn from the sponsors, and to basically take a bit of time. Now, when you think of that, and when you think of how you used to learn, you went to a classroom and things of that nature, and when I think of companies and how I'm learning and thinking about how the world is changing, I often think about looking at certain individuals or certain companies and what they're doing that's successful. Now, because each organization is different, and because even within your organizations, your team probably differs from another team, you can't just grab one person's playbook. You basically have to steal things from all the different companies that all did things well. And people have been going through transitions over time, and we can learn from this history. So some of the things I think about is the Wright brothers. The Wright brothers actually didn't invent flying, they didn't invent the plane, they did invent this fixed wing. And when they were thinking about fixed wing and doing this type of innovation, unlike Silicon Valley, they didn't want to hear, let's fail fast. Would you want to fail fast if you're building an aircraft? Probably not, right? But that meant that they had to be willing to take a risk and they had to have courage. And I think these are very important skills for organizations to think about. Not a huge amount of risk that you kill yourself, but the right amount of risk so that you can push forward, and that requires courage. In addition to courage, anybody know who this is? Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison is known for the light bulb, but there were many, many hundreds to what some people say thousands of experiments that happened before that, before he got to the point of the light bulb. So obviously, perseverance is something that's important, but also the concept of iteration and continuing to evolve and iterate and learn from that. Now, in some cases, you know, people could say that that was failure. In other cases, they could say it was pivoting. But I think there's something important in the concept of learning and iteration. Anybody know who this is? Nope. Young Darwin. It's a young Darwin. And you know, what Darwin has taught us is that as a species, we need to learn how to adapt for our survival. And the same is true with our organizations, our roles in business. Henry Ford. Henry Ford did not invent the automobile. He did not invent the assembly line. What he did do was provide the ability to drop the cost of that, scale it, and allow us to all purchase automobiles. So that was a big revolution for the time. And I might add an iteration as well. And then there's Leonardo da Vinci. And what I love about Leonardo da Vinci is that he had many careers over the course of his lifetime, and he learned to do many things. He was a very bright man, but let us not forget that he still had to apprentice and learn how to do many different skills that ranged from sculpture through to design of buildings and many interesting inventions that never worked but were super cool. So that's Leonardo. And so today I want to talk about three things. I want to talk about how digital transformation is changing, how it's changing your industries, and then what actions you should consider taking as a result of this, with some of that context of these individuals from history in mind. So digital transformation, why are we even talking about digital transformation? Enterprise transformation is the context of the show. Now, You have all been transforming, and enterprises have been digitally transforming for years. We had the PC, we had the move to video, we've had e-commerce. Does anybody have an E in their title at some point in their career? It was E-something. Yeah. So we've all gone through a transformation, and we continue to go through transformations today. But I do think that there are 4 things that are different about how we are transforming our organizations today. I think one of them is how we transform the organization itself. The second is how technology is transforming. The third is access. And the fourth is speed. And I'll go through each of these. So we talked about Darwin and adaptation. And if you recall, he actually studied finches and how they were different beaks based on what island they were in at that time. And they had evolved from, say, this one finch that moved to a different island that had to basically search for food in a different way, right? So organizations are actually going through very similar transformations right now. We're becoming adaptable organizations. And this means that we have to adapt to different work, perhaps it's remote work, different tools, part-time work, and a different cadence in terms of how we develop products and services. Now, we talked about Leonardo, and Leonardo having different careers, and Leonardo and mastery. So if we look at Leonardo's mastery, he did art, anatomy, mechanics, and architecture. And he basically went through his whole life as experimentation and shared learning. And he used each of these different skills to reinforce and build upon for his next jobs and his career over his life, which I think is a fascinating thing, and I think is very important for us as individuals to think about. But it's also very important for our companies as well. And one of the things I think is really interesting about this enterprise transformation or digital transformation or whatever you want to call it is that you in the audience are no longer responsible for just mastering one skill. You in the audience now have to master multiple technology skills all at the same time and figure out how these technologies come together and build something new and different to differentiate your business. You're looking at mobile and IoT, you're looking at cloud computing, you're looking at data and analytics. And I'm sure every person in this room probably has a title that's associated with one of these, but not all of these. And for you to be the most successful person in your career moving forward, you're going to need to have at least a base level understanding of everything that's on this slide. And to really take it to the next level, drive change by incorporating some of these technologies into your group, if you haven't already. Now, we talked about Ford and the assembly line. And what I really wanted to pull out with Ford is this concept of accessibility. And I think today, if we look at what's going on, we have multiple devices that have come in and related to, it started with mobility, but connected devices, IoT, new glasses, new watches. And what does that mean? You know, new devices are providing new ways to work. And that new way to work gives us easier access to data at all times. And that access is across roles. So we've moved from having, say, 10, 15, 20% of the organization connected to having nearly everybody connected and portable and accessing data. And that creates new challenges for our organizations. You have companies like Boeing that are actually looking at testing smart glasses now. See all that paper? They're basically able to get rid of a lot of that paper by displaying some of that information in the new test for Google Glass. You have companies like Ford that are using augmented reality. Actually, many auto manufacturers are using VR to build discovery and design for automobiles. And that's just one example. We have elevator companies that are doing training and visualizing repairs. So we're starting to see that new devices are providing new ways to educate and new ways to work. If we look at how mobile has impacted the financial services industry, we started with the concept of just getting your balance, then depositing checks, and now we're actually building conversational interfaces that allow you to engage and get support in a different way. And those conversational interfaces can be used in multiple different scenarios. One example is AmerisourceBergen with their Good Neighbor Pharmacy. You can reorder prescriptions. If you're a pharmacist, you can actually do business with AmerisourceBergen using their Alexa skill. digitally transforming, changing, new experiences, new interfaces, new ways to work. Now, anybody remember Grace Hopper? Grace Hopper was fascinating, wasn't she? As a woman, I'm very inspired by Grace Hopper. She is actually one of the founders of the modern computing era. Worked on compiling before compiling was a thing, is often known to be the creator of compiling. So what did Grace and her team do? They collaborated to find a new way to access and deliver data. And that type of collaboration is also happening today with machine learning and AI. So you have cloud computing companies, Microsoft, IBM, Google, all coming together, communities like Kaggle, to try to figure out how to push the ball forward with machine learning. And why do we care about machine learning and AI? And I'm not going to go on my rant about how there is no AI yet, but I will say that we're progressing towards AI using machine learning, deep learning neural networks. But you want to create new experiences. You're someone like Pepsi. You have a lot of data that you can get from IoT. And that data starts with machine learning to do predictive maintenance. And then you move from doing things such as predictive maintenance to creating fundamentally new engagement experiences with machines for your audience. If you're somebody like the Hanover Port Authority, you have a lot of data, you've instrumented, you're trying to figure out, how do I get more containers in and out of this port with the same physical space? And this is a data problem, it's an analytics problem, it's a connected data problem. It goes across the ecosystem of the Port Authority, the truckers, the people that own the shipping containers. And if you can pull all those together, that's an example of digital transformation, and that allows you to do things like increase your port capacity by 40%. John Deere. We all know John Deere is a tractor company, but John Deere is also one of the first examples of a data as a services business. They instrumented their equipment. They have basically used censored data and data from their equipment to figure out how to change farming for their clients. And people subscribe to these services now. And these services, or at least some of the data from them, can actually be leveraged in other ways going forward for new business models. And then you have companies like Hitachi that instrumented their trains back on this predictive maintenance concept and have moved from thinking of their trains as just something that has superior uptime to actually selling trains as a service in the UK. So fundamental new business models around existing hardware and infrastructure. Now I mentioned the third thing was, or the fourth thing, is speed. Now, I've spent some time with the CIO of Infinity Bull Racing. I wasn't a big racing fan, but I'm really impressed with what I learned from how racing is using technology. They set up new wireless networks wherever they go. They take in thousands to almost millions of data points. They analyze them in near real time, and then they decide how to change either the driver performance or something that's going on with the car, and when to do the pit stops. It's fascinating what you can do, and at the speed that they do this in that industry. Now, I don't think this industry is like many others. However, I will say that those principles can apply to all of us. And companies, for example, that aren't in the racing industry, like Liberty Mutual, are talking a lot about speed and time to market, and this concept of iteration and experimentation so that they can get the right services at the right time to their client base and be more successful. We're also talking to Taco Bell. Taco Bell's really interesting because they've had a few stumbles, and the new CEO actually introduced a really interesting culture. Apparently, what would happen is ideas were squashed before they were even tested. So he created this concept of, instead of failing fast, it was basically testing, learning, and iterating. And then he took a few risks as well. Like, for example, one thing I think most people wouldn't do that I thought was extremely risky, he basically hired somebody and gave them full reign of social media and said, here are the brand guidelines. I trust you, don't screw it up. Not too many CEOs would do that. That was risk and courage that seems to be paying off. So the concept of risk and courage that goes everywhere from here, we got legal to say it's okay for you to do this and be the social media person, all the way to we're going to try these experiments and even though we know 15 reasons why they might not work, there might be a few reasons why they could work, and that will really change our business. Apparently, one of those experiments was around whether or not you could have a Taco Bell without a drive-thru. Now, living in San Francisco, we don't have drive-thrus for anything, so this was kind of like, oh yeah, I guess that's how that works. But having said that, he's now creating experience centers around Taco Bell. What's the experience of actually going into a Taco Bell? Why would you go there versus somewhere else? I think these are fascinating questions that we as organizations have to think about. What is the experience that we are delivering, and how do you contribute to that experience in your role? So this is all a great vision, but this vision doesn't happen without you. You are the people that are responsible for going out and making this vision a reality. And one of the things that you really have to think about are what are the new ideas in your organization, and how do you go back and use your role as a way to support making these ideas happen. And just in case anybody doubts that this is a good idea, let's think of the power of the idea. Does anybody know what this is? This is basically the sales figures for Singles Day in China. $25 billion was transacted in one day in China for Singles Day, because one person had the idea that what if we turned this holiday that seems kind of hokey into the equivalent of Black Friday for China? $25 billion, that's the power of an idea. So how do we make ideas happen? All right, let's talk about that. So digital transformation. Okay, by now you know that this is not just about technology. It's a lot about people, it's a lot about changing your process, and it's also about technology. So we'll talk about each of those. One of the things I'd like to say is when we think about technology, I think everybody thought that technology in the device domain, it was smartphones and tablets. Well, we keep getting new devices. So I think you should consider that that portfolio is going to continue to expand, and that you need to have solutions around the management and support of that. You also need to have security solutions. And we've been talking about security for a while. Most of our security has been around threat prevention. I think one of the things we need to think about now is really threat detection. How do we detect if we've been breached? But also, how do we, as we move into this new world of devices and apps and new structures, creating self-defending apps, having devices that have security baked into them at the outset, looking at how we're going to do authentication in a mobile, cloud, IoT, beyond the PC world. These are all critical security questions. In addition, you need to think about physical security depending on what type of organization you are. If you're making smart lampposts, well, you've got to make sure that the lampposts don't get tampered with. And this is in every organization. In one, it's lampposts, in another, it's printer hacks. So security should be at the heart of every person's strategy in this room. Even if you're not responsible for security, you should be asking the question. And then we see there's a lot of application and process change. So when I talked about process change, one of the things we saw happen in mobile is everybody replicated the same processes we had in the PC, and we shrank them down, we made them smaller. And now what we need to do is we need to take them to the next level, where they have the context of what's on board with the device, where you are, what you've done in the past, what data you typically interact with, and how to pull these together into something that I call a right time experience. Right information, right person, right time, device of choice. I believe that cloud computing is fundamental to our digital transformation strategies. Whether or not you are looking at how dev test environments in the cloud will change your application development, or platforms as a service will give you new capabilities, or skip building the app altogether and do software as a service, or you as an organization with data trying to figure out how to build your own data as a service strategies. There's no one way to do cloud. As a matter of fact, I see Joe Wyman over there, and he will be talking all about how we do cloud in a later presentation during this session. But having said that, I'm seeing everything from someone like Bank of America talking about having 50 to 80% of their cloud as a private cloud, to someone like GE talking about having 9,000 apps in the cloud and have it be a more public style environment. So there's no right way to do this per se. There will be different ways depending on who you are. but it's basically figuring out how cloud fits into each of your strategies. And we talked a little bit about data as a model. I think one of the things we've talked about forever is connecting our own internal data. That's the first thing we need to do, break down some of those silos. Maybe we add third-party data to make our services more interesting. We might buy that, and we might start selling data. So thinking about when you are building and connecting new things, what are the implications for future business models around that? I think partner ecosystems are becoming increasingly important. I think you should look at your vendors and see what kind of partner ecosystems they have. I think you should be thinking about your internal partners that are going to help drive business change with you. And I think you should be thinking about who you might work with as an organization to build combined services. What's the power of a partner? Let's take somebody like Salesforce. There's actually a chart on the internet called the Salesforce economy. I think that says it all right there, right? They started out as this little tiny SaaS company many, many years ago, and now they are a partnering machine. And that partnering machine meant that people built around them and made them more valuable. So you have to think about what are the strategies where people build around you, and how do you, as an entity, make each other more valuable? We talked about Leonardo, and Leonardo being a polymath, a fascinating individual that was extremely bright. So what can we learn from Leonardo in this sense? We can learn that there will be skills gaps as we move into this new general digital transformation era. And instead of allowing there to be a huge gap, we have the opportunity to start bridging that today. Let me give you a few examples. Adobe. How many people have used Adobe software? Probably everybody in the room at some point, right? Okay. At one point, Adobe realized that it needed to retask 20% of its engineers onto a new project so that they as a company could be successful. Guess what? That 20% of the software engineers had no idea how to do this new project. They had to go learn. They had to go be redeployed, but also reskilled. And they were allowed to do that. And that was a big, bold move for an organization to sort of carve off a part of the workforce and allow them to do something different and allow them to learn. Similarly, GE is also working on reskilling the workforce. I had a chance to talk to them at Minds and Machines, and they said that for certain groups, because of where they are in transitioning their business, that they're giving them 25% of their time, basically a day a week or so, 20, 25%, so that they can actually learn new skills so that they can participate in the new digitally enabled GE economy. And why did they do that? Because you can't hire enough people to do this. If you can't hire them, you have to actively build a strategy to grow transformation skills in your organization. So think about that, because this is what you're competing against. Now, having said all this, I want you to go out and I want you to think of small changes that you can make, because enough small changes create a large impact within an organization. And I also want you to think about the concept that innovation never ends. Even if you're somebody like Uber, you realize that you could be disrupted. So if you can be disrupted, you have to continually look at what the next evolution might be for your organization. And whether you love him or hate him, you got to admit, Elon Musk is always looking ahead. So you, in your roles and in your organizations, need to always be looking ahead for what's next. Even if it seems like it's 5 years away, 5 years could be 3 years, 5 years could be a year and a half, we don't know. So make sure you're always looking ahead so that you'll be prepared for the future of work, the future of digital transformation, and make great decisions that will keep us all employed. So with that, I'm going to say that this is a learning environment. I hope you will learn and share with each other. That's why we're here. And I'm excited to have you all here. And I will turn it over. Actually, I'm not going to turn it over to Phil. I think at this point, we're going to go direct to Eric. Eric McCarty is with Samsung. I've had the pleasure of knowing Eric for many years now. And he is the VP of Mobile Product Development. He's going to have a few words on stage, and then I'll come up and ask some questions. So thank you for your time and attention.
Great job, as always.